DC, I know that Wang Ming has done extraordinary work
Yes.
in China, the Solar Valley, and I believe that Himin has 10% of the Chinese solar market. Tell us a little bit about some of the breakthroughs that are happening.
So at one point, he had 35% of all the sales in China. And what happened was that he loves excellence. And he was crazy that they started doing all these inferior products. So he stepped back from it, but when you meet Wang Ming on Wednesday, he'll arrive tomorrow night, you will see that he is a brilliant architect, he is an engineer and a designer. So when he had his transformational experience when his baby was born, and he was an engineer in the oil industry, one of the top ones, he realized that the world needed to really have another solution because his daughter was going to have a horrible world to come into. So he literally ran down to his last 2,000 RMBs and a miracle occurred. And through many wonderful stories that you can go to solarvalleychina.com and learn about him, he was able to build this solar valley that's 500,000 meters. They have 6,000 employees. They have what they call traded over 55 billion yuan. And they have had the opportunity to introduce some of the most innovative solar products and have demonstrated a whole solar city, which is 1 hour and 10 minutes away from Beijing. Right now, we are working on something so fascinating, which is to transform all the schools, middle schools and primary schools in China from being coal heated to solar. And so I think that now we have done 2 or 3 schools to demonstrate it. And so in China, the way you do it, you demonstrate it, and then they pretty much tell a bank, you have to finance this, and they have to. And so they're working, if that project goes through, there will be 100,000 schools that will be using now solar heating based on renewables. Now this will set a precedence that will be seen all over the world, and already with Sally, we're talking about with the Malala Foundation to introduce that work to them. And then we also had a visit a year and a half ago with Bangladesh, that after Wang Ming went to visit, they passed the first law that all new building in Bangladesh has to have a component on renewables. The second thing is that we're working on a thing called zero energy toilets. And if you want to look this up, Fareed Zakaria had a very interesting article 3 weeks ago on CNN where China and India are having a race on who can build the most toilets. And I don't know if you know this, but there's nearly 2 billion people in the world that has no toilets. So this is a very interesting thing. So this particular innovation that he has just created is something that we want to put out globally. And the last thing, the latest of the latest that we're doing is that he has solar cookers. So if you come to the little booth that we have in the other ballroom, you will see the solar cookers, but I've been asking him for many years for 2 things. A solar cooker that could be taken anywhere. So for $40, we have a solar cooker that can cook for 10, a family of 10. It can boil water, and you can actually use it also for hospitals and for having hot water sanitized things. So those are the 3 major, these are all global projects. And then the second solar valley is being built in Brazil, right outside of Rio de Janeiro. And so there are many different things, but those are the key ones that when you meet Wang Ming on Wednesday, please, he's the most beautiful man, and I feel so honored to be representing him right now.
Yes, thank you, DC. We're very, very blessed that Wang Ming has taken an interest in AREDAY and wants to move some of that work that you just described into the United States, and Sally and I really want to help facilitate all of that. The one point that you made, I want to make sure everybody really hears clearly. 2 billion people don't have toilets. You know, we learned last night in one of the films that this translates to a very serious issue with women, and India happens to have a very big problem where women aren't treated properly, let's just say that. A lot of problem that relates directly to having something as simple as a place to urinate, to go to the bathroom. And so this translates into a lot of abuse issues and worse. And so one part of the conference is about the equity piece, the gender equity piece, and that's something that the world, I think, has to look at if we're going to even have a chance of balancing the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So I want to bring that into this panel discussion as well. John, your work in Beijing is extraordinary. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the momentum that RMI is making there in your conversations with the higher levels of government, et cetera?
Sure, thanks, Chip. I want to start with DC's comment that there is a huge economic opportunity around the transition to renewables. And I think as Daniel has said, the G2 really played a pivotal role in catalyzing Paris. RMI was right in the middle of China and the US in brokering a number of different discussions that happened before the major presidential announcements, and have been partnered with the National Development and Reform Commission in China to do some detailed analysis on how China can make the transition. And what we found is that China can, in the end, transform its economy to grow about sixfold by 2050, using about the same amount of energy as it did in 2010, where about 60% of that energy would be from renewable sources, reducing its overall carbon emissions by about 40% against 2010 levels. That's an extraordinary transformation. But the most powerful aspect of this analysis is that they can actually do that for a profit. They can save about $3.5 trillion US in the process of managing that transformation, which is very important for a China that today has hit an economic slowdown, which is very important for a China today that has cities that are choking because of its current dependence upon fossil fuels and coal in particular. Right? So there are a number of key things that need to happen for China to manage this transition, but most importantly is for it to move from being a very efficient kind of collector of low-value minerals, low-value energy, and putting a tremendous amount of energy into that and converting it into very low economic value. Right? If China continues in its current model, it will not only choke itself, but it will stifle its economy and won't be able to make the transition to a fully developed economy over time. It'll get stuck in the middle income trap. Right? And so developing high value adding industries over time is critical. And in this respect, companies like Himin offer not just a high value added industry, but a set of services around it that China can use not only to economically deal with its own energy challenges of security and pollution, but it also offers the opportunity to export that service, those manufactured goods to the rest of the world for much higher value-added goods than steel longs or other commodity-based materials that China currently exports. So it's a tremendous opportunity for China, but it's also a tremendous opportunity for the US. And it's herein that the US and China working together can help not only solve the rest of the world's economy and decouple GDP growth from a dependence on energy, but also help stimulate local economies to grow their own renewable installation, renewable services industries that are very localized in how they're implemented, even if some of the sources of the materials are global in terms of the markets that they're sourced from. This is a tremendous opportunity for everyone to end the addiction to fossil fuels, and really one, again, that over the past several years has become tremendously economic and can be driven by market forces.
Great, John. It's great to know that that kind of optimism is coming out of Basalt, Colorado, all the way to Beijing. Jens, you mentioned that you are traveling to many of these conferences. You're keeping in this high-level dialogue. I know that you are producing a summit that's parallel to COP22 in Marrakesh later on this year. Maybe you can take us there, because remember, besides this theme of this panel, which has to do with 195 countries coming together on the Paris Agreement, we're also talking about going from Paris Agreement to the U.S. election this fall, the Paris to the polls, and the implementation of low-carbon economies. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about how you see what is going to happen in Marrakesh post-U.S. election. I think it happens right afterwards. So we'll actually have a new president of the United States. And coming off of this extraordinary agreement, but that is non-binding.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the COP this year in Marrakesh will be in November, so it's right after the U.S. election. And the Moroccan government has called a lot of stakeholders to Rabat this week, so I'm actually traveling from Aspen to Rabat in 2 days to sort of conceptualize actually what's going to happen at COP22. And the Moroccans, they want to build on the Paris deal to make sure that there is a future for the COP process also after Paris, and which is making sense in itself. I want to say that it's fantastic with the Paris Agreement, and now we are starting on the NDCs, the National Determined Contributions. I want to say this is just the first part of a very, very long journey that will take many years. And the NDCs are not really plans, they are more like policy instruments, ways of putting carbon emissions into the macroeconomic models. In some countries, they're really well done. Other countries, they're made in 2 days by some outside consultants vested in the Ministry of Environment, and not with no buy-in yet of the other ministries for energy and transport that really sits with all the carbon emissions. So there's a lot of work to be done in formulating and implementing the NDCs, right? And I think that is one of the key anchoring points that will be dealt with in Marrakesh, how to really push this to be real and going from an ambition to actually start implementing the deal.
What do you think might come from the Marrakesh meeting this year, to further implement the agreement that was made in Paris?
I think there'll be progression on the agreement and the various instruments following the agreement, but the Moroccan government also wants to see the whole picture in a more holistic way, and also focus on innovation, not just innovation of today, but also innovation of tomorrow. And I want to say that it's exactly what you mentioned also. We're at the verge of development of a whole new industry, which will sort of be a replacement of the fossil fuel area. And it's not just policy that matters, it's also technological advancements, it's demographic factors, it is economic factors, and you have to look at it in a more holistic way. And I think the Moroccans, they will focus on that too, to put it in a bigger picture.
No, that's very exciting news. Innovation is a very important word that's being used quite a bit by President Obama, everybody else, and we're now entering in this phase. We've heard today already that renewables are not only competitive with fossils, but they're actually more profitable. Now, an extraordinary announcement was made a few weeks ago where General Electric, one of our major blue chip companies, announced that they were getting out of all of their fossil fuel energy production units and getting into renewable energy production units for electricity. Now, when GE starts making moves like that, pay attention. And the reason that they said was because renewables make more money. So, Daniel, in terms of innovation in China, and in terms of how fast we have to go so far, maybe you can comment on some of the work that you're doing. I know that you have a seat in the government in China, and are privy to some of the strategies that are being implemented?
I think there are three drivers which give a real silver lining to the cloud. And I'm a perennial optimist, because if I weren't, I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. But I think number one, we have today in China still a semi-vertical hybrid command/market economy, which means that things can happen very, very quickly if the policy is implemented. Number two, there is an absence of an entrenched oil and gas lobby in China. There's no such thing, which is very, very helpful. It's a blessing. Number three, China is actually very, very poorly served in terms of natural resources, particularly energy resources, compared to the United States. China has 1/6 of the fossil fuel resources of the United States. But China has 4.5 times the population of the United States. The situation is totally acute. And that is why the incentive to move very rapidly to renewables and to green energy is so compelling. I mean, there's no alternative. There's no choice. Our backs are to the walls. So those are the real drivers of the green revolution. And of course, we know that one of the main planks of the present 5-year plan is green energy revolution. And therefore, there's a lot of money available to green technology. And there's a lot of interest in cooperating with the United States in engineering this green revolution. There's no question that the United States is still at the forefront of the tech revolution globally. China recognizes that. And the essence of the agreement between Xi Jinping and Obama is that the relationship should be based not on competition, but on cooperation and mutual respect. And that is where the opportunities lie. So that's the good news. And I think we'll see a lot of momentum in September in Hangzhou at the summit of G20 on the 4th and 5th of September this year in pushing forward finance and commercial innovation, which will be a main plank of both Chinese and American policy. In fact, Jack Lew has already said publicly that the United States will fully back China on working to engineer this green revolution, which will be mutually beneficial, not just to the two countries, but to the world economy.
I think I heard you connect innovation, some of the innovation that's coming out of the United States, and the implementation of that in China. And perhaps that China has a much greater opportunity to implement these kinds of innovative breakthroughs faster than perhaps anywhere in the world.
I think that's right. I mean, we have something like 650 cities in China, and the city is defined as anything above 500,000 in population. So in other words, there is a real prospect of experimentation with technology whereby a municipality can cordon off an area for experimentation, which is not possible in the United States, not possible in anywhere else in the world. Because China is urbanizing so fast, and we've reached a tipping point of over 50% urban population 3 years ago. Now, China will never be as urban as the United States. China will probably stabilize, we think, at about 70% urban, 30% rural. But within that 70% of the 1.35 billion people, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of new cities. And the new cities can do a technological leap, which is not possible in the United States or in Europe. Secondly, because of the semi-command economy, municipalities are prepared to experiment, and they're prepared to cordon off areas where you can go completely green and you could go completely renewable. That is the beauty of China, and that is a huge opportunity, not just for China, but for the entire world, particularly for the United States, because this is the technology giant of the world. No, there's no question about it. And China recognizes that. And we do want to work with the United States to make this thing happen, because we only live on one planet.
I'm just sitting here imagining if we had sectors in the United States where that was an option, where we could just go 100% renewable energy green, and that was something that the citizens of the United States could actually choose, you know. And I want to, you know, acknowledge the presence of Senator Udall, who's entered the room, and your great leadership trying to get to those, you know, that kind of a place in our country that's so needed, and that maybe, you know, the United States and China can come together and really begin to facilitate these kind of sectors in our society where there are these renewable energy towns, cities, communities where the citizens of the United States are allowed to choose that and not being forced to have fossil fuel energy if they don't want that. DC,
Oh, I'm so excited.
I'd like you to weigh in here a
Yes.
little bit. Given that you work so closely with Huang Ming, given that that he has, I believe, somewhere on the lines of 750,000 or 1 million solar thermal units on the roofs of China. This guy has really been implementing,
Yes.
has been a force in China and is becoming a force in the world on that. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the Himin vision in terms of, I understand that they're doing a solar valley in Brazil, no?
Yes.
And maybe some of the plans for the U.S.
Yes, and if I may add to what Danielle was saying, one of the things that's happening too, and this is where Wang Ming and I became very good friends. He was a speaker at our business school for entrepreneurs in China. And so we churn out social entrepreneurs. That's what I actually have been doing for nearly 40 years. And one of our mentors was Buckminster Fuller, for those of you that may or may not know who he is. And so when Wang Ming and I began to talk, he had never heard of Buckminster Fuller. And so it was so magnificent for him to see that you could actually combine that kind of technology and also build a very profitable business. So I have been supporting him in taking a look at all of the different ways that we can churn out social entrepreneurs that are green. And so that's what I've been doing since I met particularly Chip and Sally. It has really accelerated. And basically what I'm supporting Wang Ming right now is for him to take a look at all the places, particularly in the United States, that we can have a solar valley. And 3 weeks ago, I was a token Latina in the totally all-black, biggest entrepreneurial program in this country. And there were 1,300 of the most fabulous black entrepreneurs. And I met a beautiful man, and I will remember his name in a minute, that is one of the top billionaire with heart in Detroit. And I had dreamed about having a solar valley in Detroit, and I couldn't believe, because when we started having the conversation about it, he says, how about if we do one in Detroit? Because of all the empty houses and all that. So what I've been empowering and supporting Wang Ming is to really for us to go to places here in the United States and make it literally all American. Because we know of the underlying, I found out the hard way one day, the underlying prejudice that can occur in this country against China. And then we have a little crazy guy right now that we all know who he is running for office, is not helping the reputation. So what we're working on is, especially with Sally and with Chip, in creating new projects in the United States that we will be able to take all of these things that have been tested for nearly 20 years, all the learning experiences, all the mistakes that have been made in China, and let China, when I met Bill Clinton a few weeks ago, I said to him, I have good news, and I bring a gift from China. And that is all the learning experiences they have had around green, around renewables, and let us bring it here. And that's what I am. Wang Ming is coming here for just 2.5 days to be with you so that you can just really get the essence, besides Daniel, of these beautiful Chinese entrepreneurs that are making. I get very moved, I get very emotional, and because they are doing things that Buckminster Fuller would have only dreamed about, and he predicted, and they're happening faster than he even predicted. So thank God for that, and thank you, Sally and Chip, for your work, because it's magnificent what we're doing here. And thank you to the whole panel. Thank you.
Well, thank you, DC, and thank you for your leadership. You know, there were some statistics that Daniel mentioned earlier, but you left one off. I want to mention that. So 40% of the energy use, U.S., China, 45% of the greenhouse gas throughput to the atmosphere, but 50% of the global GDP is shared between the two countries. And it's important to realize that two countries have half the world's economy. And so to think that we would then be able to work with China and implement some of the strategies that you and Amory Levins and your other colleagues at Rocky Mountain Institute have been working so hard. And I also want to mention the work of Hal Harvey here, somebody else who has been working very hard to make this green bridge with China on our conversation around G2. John, can you talk a little bit about how the innovative breakthroughs that are happening here can be fast-tracked and are being, in fact, fast-tracked in China, where in some places the situation is so desperate that they have dead zones with there aren't any birds left and so forth?
Yeah, no, this is, I mean, speed to scale is the big question in China, and how exactly do you propagate, you know, these solutions across the entire country? And certainly, as Daniel had indicated, one of the key mechanisms that China has is a responsibility system between the government and the individual cities and states that allows policies to be experimented with and what works to be rapidly replicated. And this will benefit not just China, but the whole rest of the world, because I think there are two big driving issues that China needs to solve quickly and help, yes, the US get a little bit better, but it's more so for the developing world, right? And these two issues are, one, urbanization, right, where we're moving toward a world where 70% of the global population will be urbanized here over the next 30 years. And number two, the electricity system, and how do we create a resilient, renewable grid that can provide energy to all of the different sources of mobility, you know, efficient buildings, industry, et cetera, that are all integrated within those urban settings. And so China right now, and I just came back from Beijing 2 weeks ago, along with the strategic and economic dialogue that was happening there. There was a joint US-China city summit between leading cities in the United States and leading cities in China. And there's a group within China called the Alliance of Pioneer Peaking Cities. And all of those cities have agreed to peak their carbon emissions before the 2030 timeline that the Chinese government has agreed to. And what this does is this creates the momentum and the clear learnings that can then be propagated through the rest of the cities in time. These 650 cities, you know, if you think about it, China has just about 200 cities that have over 1 million people in it. The United States has 9, I think, by most recent count, right? So cities are a massive opportunity for China to help lead on. And this Alliance of Pioneer Peaking Cities and how it comes together and how these cities peak in the next 3, 5, 7 years and find the right recipe for efficiency, migrating to renewables, you know, better, cleaner use of energy in buildings, in transportation systems, in the overall design and urbanization form, I think is critical. And then the second piece really around electrification is how to build and manage a highly resilient grid, which China, again, if they can provide clean energy to these urban settings, it's solving a lot of the problems and allowing low carbon mobility to flourish. Between those two answers, that covers roughly 90% of what the world needs in terms of solutions. There is some mobility around jets and around large ocean-going vessels, et cetera, that we need to innovate on as well. But it would take the whole developing world a big step forward. And if China and the US both exported, you know, solutions for the developed and the developing worlds, we would all be in a much better place here going forward.
Yes, no doubt about that. Thank you so much for your insights on that. Now, Jens, we're down to where we're running out of time, but I wanted to get to a piece that is also an area of your interest, and that is the work that you're doing in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi, and maybe you could talk a little bit about how the royal family there is looking at these issues, and particularly regarding, I understand that there's a development of a very large new clean energy fund that's going to be emanating from that area.
First of all, it's not Abu Dhabi, it's Dubai.
Oh.
If you want to talk about Abu Dhabi, you should ask maybe the president over here. No, but they're very close to each other, Abu Dhabi and Dubai, so there's just 1 hour between the two cities. So anyway, we started working with the Dubai government 3 years ago. And when you mention Dubai, most people, they think of Las Vegas of the Middle East. They do not think of a green place. But if you see what has happened now, it's actually quite drastic. I can just take the latest news from the Bloomberg New Energy Finance, where they say that the cost of clean energy seen nosediving into the next decade, with a quote from Adnan Amin from AREDAY, that historically cost has been the primary obstacle to renewable energy. And just last month, the record for the cheapest solar tariff was set in Dubai at 2.99 cents. That is US cents per kilowatt hour. It's 15% cheaper than the previous record. So this is actually Dubai being world leading in having the cheapest renewable energy cost. What is behind this is mainly what I would say is leadership. Leadership in terms of being able to set a vision despite a lot of obstacles and difficulties. So Dubai have put forward a vision to have 75% renewable energy in 2050 and 25% in 2030. It is making a number of programs. First of all, reducing energy usage in 30,000 buildings. I mean, it is quite easy to reduce energy usage in Dubai, I would say. So it's the right area to attack, and it's building the largest solar park in the world at 5,000 megawatt. And as you mentioned, they have decided to create the biggest, one of the largest city funds ever at $27 billion US. So they definitely want to get there. They are the fastest moving place in the Middle East, and they want to be one of the fastest moving cities in the world in the green space.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, and so I need to thank my esteemed panelists here, and let's hope that we can bring China and the Middle East together and have the U.S. be a solid partner in that. Thank you so much.